once popular savings bond that has an interest rate connected to inflation, is it time to take another look at the I bond? I've got that and more coming up. My name's Mike Bernard. I'm the host of the Wise Money Show. I'm also one of the certified financial planners right here at Korhorn Financial Group. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and smash that thumbs up button. The I bond, the inflation connected savings bond, grew in popularity extremely quickly in the post-COVID years. As inflation was rising, the unique savings bond that has an interest rate connected to inflation was all of a sudden paying over 6%, 5%, over 6%, 7%, 9% at its peak, over 9%. All this while your high yield money market or your savings account was paying next to nothing. Because the Fed at that time, if you remember going back a few years, we all felt and knew inflation was really heating up, and yet the Fed was not moving interest rates. They were not increasing interest rates. Therefore, the interest that we were all getting on our savings accounts still just meager, very small, and yet this unique savings bond, the I bond, has a inflation component to its interest rate and was paying, unbelievable interest rates guaranteed by the government. Well, if you invested back then, you've seen that inflation component, that variable interest rate go down and down and down, and most people have sold out, they've cashed in those savings bonds, and they don't hold them anymore. However, with the recent changes with the I bond interest rate and what likely is ahead with interest rates from the Fed, is it time to take another look? So here's how these I bonds, these savings bonds work. They're savings bonds, they sound simple, they're wildly complicated. With I bonds, each person can invest up to $10,000 a year, okay? And there's a little creativity that you can use to do above that slightly, but just for simplicity, think 10 grand a year is what you can invest. You have to invest through Treasury Direct interest rate, or you could buy them paper through your tax return. That gets that complexity a little bit, but think you can't invest in it through your brokerage account or IRA. You got to go to Treasury Direct. These are 30-year bonds, but that's the length of them. You don't need to hold it for 30 years. You actually have to hold it for a minimum of 12 months. But if you cash it in within 5 years, you have to pay back 3 months worth of interest. From a tax standpoint, there's a little bit of tax favorability here as well. If you just own a CD, the interest on that CD, you've got to report on your tax return every single year. With I bonds, you don't have to do that. You have a choice to let the interest accrue and not pay tax until the very end when you cash it in. Or you could choose to say, I'll pay tax every year. Most people don't do that. They want that tax efficiency. So the interest accumulates on a tax sheltered basis. But then when you cash it in, that's when you report the interest income on your tax return, all of it in that 1 year. It's taxable at the federal level, not taxed at the state level. So a little bit of tax benefit there. But it's the interest rate that really makes the I bond unique. The interest rate is made up of two components. One is a fixed rate that you're going to get per year for as long as you hold that bond until you cash it in for up to 30 years. The other is a variable interest rate that's connected to inflation. And this variable interest rate changes every 6 months. A new rate is posted on May 1st and then November 1st, but depending on when you invested, you'll have that interest rate, that variable component, for 6 months, and then it will change to the new rate, and then you'll hold that for 6 months, then it will change to the new rate. And so, like I said, if you took the bait, as so many people did, it was hard not to, and invested when these were paying 5%, 6%, over 7%, over 9%, then yeah, you received that interest rate on an annualized basis for that period. But then those interest rates, that variable component has changed, and you saw that interest rate go down and down and down, and for a time was well below what you could get at a high yield money market or at a CD. So many people, if you invested in the I bonds back a couple years ago, you've already cashed them in. And that's been the common case. But with how the interest rate is structured now, is it time to take another look? Right now, the interest rate, and this includes both the fixed and the variable, 3.98% on an annualized basis. So call it 4%. 1.1% is fixed, and the other component is the variable component, okay? Now, you might say, that's not too exciting. That's nothing near the 6 and 7 and 9% that we saw a couple of years ago. Why is it time to reconsider? Well, when you compare and contrast this interest rate to what you could get elsewhere, say your high yield money market, let's just pick on Marcus, for example, Marcus from Goldman Sachs. That right now, that interest rate, 3.75%. Most high yield money markets are paying in the mid to high threes, some approaching 4%. And yeah, that's right in the ballpark of this I bond. So is the complexity of the I bond really worth it when you're getting an interest rate that is comparable and that interest rate is going to change? Well, here's why it might be. Because we know that the interest rate on your high yield money market, that's also going to change as well. That's not locked in either. So the current trend is that CPI inflation, CPI, has been coming down. It's not quite to the 2% target that the Fed keeps talking about, but it's close, okay? And if that continues, and say nothing changes, inflation just stays stable or continues to come down, the Fed, once again, is late. They have reduced interest rates some, but they haven't reduced interest rates anywhere near to match what inflation is. So it's likely, again, if the current trend continues, scenario one is it's likely that at some point soon, the Fed's going to start lowering interest rates more. And what's going to happen? Your Marcus or your high yield money market, that interest rate, which was near 5% or at 5%, now 3.75, will continue to go down, okay? And in contrast to this I bond, your 1.1% that is fixed will be locked in forever. And this is assuming that inflation currently kind of stays in the same general vicinity as what it is. And that same general level is combining with that 1.1% fixed rate for an I bond to get a 4% yield. So it seems like if the trend continues, the I bond interest rate should stay near that 4% range. We don't know the future, but would stay near that if where we currently stand is sort of projected out into the future, and yet the interest on your high yield savings account is likely to go down. Now, what about the alternate scenario? And this is where some concerns about tariffs and yeah, we still have a growing money supply. And so, what if inflation actually picks back up? And that's where the Fed is saying, hey, not too fast. We're not gonna lower interest rates too quickly. So, what if inflation reverses course and starts going back up? Well, with these I bonds, the variable, the inflation component of the interest rate is likely to increase, right? And even though your money market right now, Marcus or high yield money market, is 3.75, and so it could increase some back up to 4.5%, I would expect that there's more upward potential with the interest rate on these I bonds than there is with your high yield money market. So that's the case. At the surface, you might say, not really worth it. But playing out a couple of the likely scenarios of where we go from here may be worth reconsidering the I bond. Work with your certified financial planner. These are complicated. There's, again, this tax component as well. And you also need to look at, well, what are the dollars, the money that you would put into these savings bonds? What's the purpose? What's the function in your financial life? Work with your certified financial planner on that. If you don't have a CFP on your team, you can contact one on my team. Find us online, Korhorn.com. That's Korhorn with K, wisemoneyshow.com. You can find us there as well, or send us an email, info@korhorn.com. All right, there you have it. Go out and take your next wise step in your financial life.